Today, House Republicans passed their bill for cutting taxes for corporations and the wealthy and adding $1.5 trillion to the national deficit. President Trump has just tweeted about the vote. Big win today in the House for GOP tax cuts and reform, 227 to 205. Zero Dems. They want to raise taxes much higher, but not for our military. President Trump is correct that zero Democrats voted for the bill, but there were also 13 Republicans from high-tax states, these ones here, who voted no because they say the bill raises taxes on their constituents. But actually, it probably raises taxes on a lot more than their constituents. If the bill becomes law, President Trump and his family could get a big tax cut, $1 billion, according to an analysis commissioned by NBC News. That's not what Donald Trump promised his supporters.
My plan is for the working people, and my plan is for jobs.
You wouldn't benefit from taxes?
No, I don't benefit. I don't benefit.
Wow. The focus of tax cuts now moves to the Senate. Today, the Joint Committee on Taxation, Congress's nonpartisan scorekeeper on taxes, projected that while the wealthy see a tax cut under the Senate GOP bill, quote, Americans earning $30,000 or less would see their taxes increase beginning in 2021 if the Senate bill becomes law, and Americans earning $75,000 or less would face large tax increases in 2027. Joining us now, Ezra Klein, editor-at-large at Vox and host of the Ezra Klein Show, and Steve Bell, a senior advisor at the Bipartisan Policy Center and the former staff director of the Senate Budget Committee. Steve, let me just start with you. There is something called a sunset on the personal tax cuts here, not on the corporate tax cuts. So the corporate tax cuts that get passed if the Senate bill goes through and they reconcile it and it all happens are forever. The personal tax cuts are for 10 years. There are some budgetary reasons why that works, but in the end, Americans who think they're getting something of a tax cut now may see that turn around quite violently for them in 10 years.
Oh, that's absolutely right. The decision to cut off the tax cuts, to end them after 8 years for individuals, I think is a serious mistake, and I don't think it's going to stand. They did it, of course, because they wanted to reduce the size of the deficit and keep it under $1.5 trillion over 10 years. And they've done this with other things. The way to look at this is in a kind of really cynical way, and that is they figure they can pass a bill and have individual tax cuts expire, but the next Congress would never let that happen, and they would go ahead and extend them. And we would get back in the situation we had after the Bush tax cuts, where every year, literally hundreds of billions of dollars in tax extenders happen at the end of every year.
Right.
So it's a cynical ploy.
And Ezra, when you do the math on this stuff, it adds to bigger deficits. Unless you believe the president and Gary Cohn and Steve Mnuchin and all sorts of others who say, no, this is going to unleash such violently explosive growth that it's going to take care of all of this. People's wages are going to go up. Unemployment's going to go down lower than it is. The economy is going to grow at numbers that India and China see because this is going to be so stimulative to the economy. I can't get those numbers to add up.
Nobody believes that math. And even if you look at reasonably optimistic estimates of this plan, nobody believes that math. Look, we have been in a scenario for quite a while now as a country where we have had extremely high corporate profits. So the primary thing this tax bill is trying to do in the world, which is make sure corporations have more money, we have been seeing. And we've not seen that translate into job growth in the way we thought it would. We have not seen it translate particularly into wage growth in the way we thought it would. And now we get this plan. And the Trump White House says that for all of the tax cuts we're showering on corporations, they will turn not only all of those cuts, but more than 200% worth of those cuts
to workers
into wages.
Yep.
Is ridiculous.
There's no history.
And
There's
people
nothing
don't
that shows
this.
that happens. In the Reagan time, when that happened, Steve, that didn't take place. A more recent experiment in the United Kingdom indicate, and there's nothing wrong with that. Companies do what they want to do with the money they save on taxes. It usually goes to shareholders. Sometimes it goes into capital expenditure, and it almost never goes to workers.
Well, that's right. And remember this, the Reagan tax cuts occurred when the top rate on individuals was 70%. And we were coming out of a very difficult time as we tried to battle inflation. We're not in that situation at all. The top rate now is around 39.6. And I don't know anyone who seriously practices economics on either side of the aisle who believes we will get much more than 3% growth ever because of the fact that we have an aging population. We have structural problems that a small tax cut of 1.5 trillion or 2 trillion are not going to solve.
Ezra, what happened to good old-fashioned conservative deficit hawks why is everybody falling for this idea that this growth is going to take care of their deficit?
There isn't such a thing as good old-fashioned conservative deficit hawks when it comes to taxation. This is a myth that Republicans are managed to perpetrate whenever Democrats come into office. When the Bush tax cuts went out, those were deficit financed. They were not paid for. The original Reagan tax cuts, those were deficit financed, not paid for. The Republican concern with deficits, and this is a sad fact about American politics, it is not a real concern. It is a concern used to constrain Democrats from spending. It is a concern that is leveraged by people like Paul Ryan, an author of this tax cut bill, when Barack Obama wants to put more stimulus money into, say, increasing unemployment insurance, but it evaporates the second corporate tax cuts are on the table.
All right. Important point that you guys have both made, and that is that corporate profitability is remarkably high. Interest rates are remarkably low. If companies needed to expand and employ all sorts of people in America, they wouldn't need this corporate tax cut to do it. Thanks to both of you, Ezra Klein and Steve Bell. Thank you for joining.